The crimson sky above Cytheria burned like an open wound as Elder Vextheros stumbled to the crumbling corridors of the Grand Communications Tower. His 4 arms shook with exhaustion, and his normally pristine silver robes hung in tatters. Behind him, the sound of his dying world grew louder. Screaming civilians, collapsing buildings, and the horrible chittering noise that meant the Devourer horde was getting closer. 3 days. That's all it took for these monsters to tear through the outer colonies. 3 days to destroy what his people had built over thousands of years. The Devourers moved like a living plague across the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. Entire civilizations had simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but empty, stripped worlds. Vextheros burst into the communications chamber where his aide, young Keftar, frantically worked at the transmission equipment. Sparks flew from damaged circuits, while emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the room. Outside the tower's transparent walls, they could see the northern cities burning. Massive, insect-like creatures the size of buildings crawled across the landscape, their countless legs crushing everything beneath them. Status report. Vextheros gasped, trying to catch his breath. "Sir, I've managed to boost the signal's strength," Keftar replied, his voice trembling. "But most of the relay stations are gone. We're broadcasting blind into space, hoping anyone will hear us." The Elder moved to the main console and stared at the tactical display. Red markers showed Devourer positions across their world. They controlled 70% of the planet already. The remaining Kytherian forces were scattered, running for their lives rather than fighting. How could they fight something like this? The Devourers didn't just kill. They absorbed, converted, transformed everything they touched into more themselves. "Send a message on all frequencies," Vextheros ordered. "Emergency channels, diplomatic networks, even the old pirate communication lines. Someone has to hear us." Keftar's fingers danced across the controls. "What should I tell them, Elder?" Vextheros looked out at his burning world one more time. In the distance, he could see a massive Devourer, Queen rising from the southern mountain range like a living nightmare. She was easily the size of their largest city, with countless smaller creatures swarming around her like parasites. "Tell them the truth," he said quietly. "Tell them the Devourer horde has found us. Tell them we have maybe 2 days before our world dies completely. Tell them we're not warriors. We never were. We're scientists, artists, philosophers. We built beautiful cities and wrote poetry about the stars, but we never learned how to kill." The transmission began broadcasting across the galaxy. Most species had already fled this entire sector of space when the first reports of the Devourer horde came in 6 months ago. The few civilizations that tried to fight had been consumed within weeks. The smart ones ran early and ran far. But in a distant spiral arm on a small blue-green world called Earth, something unexpected happened. The signal reached a monitoring station in what humans call Colorado, where a night shift operator named Billy Patterson was drinking his 4th cup of coffee and complaining about the boring assignment. When the alien transmission came through, he nearly fell out of his chair. "Holy hell," he muttered, quickly routing the signal to his supervisor. "Boss, you need to hear this right now." Within 30 minutes, the message had traveled up the chain of command to the highest levels of human government and military leadership. In a secure bunker beneath Washington, D.C., Admiral Robert Hayes studied the translation with growing interest. "So we're not alone after all," he said to his staff. "And it sounds like our new neighbors are in serious trouble." General Michael Foster, a grizzled veteran of humanity's various conflicts, leaned forward. "The translation software is still working on it, but from what we can tell, these Devourers are some kind of hive mind species that consumes entire planets. They've been tearing through that sector for months." "Any other species responding to the distress call?" Hayes asked. "None that we can detect, sir. Looks like everyone else has either fled or been destroyed." Hayes stood up and walked to the massive wall display, showing Earth's position relative to the alien distress signal. It would take their fastest ships nearly 18 hours to reach the Kytherian system, assuming their new faster-than-light drives worked as advertised. "What are our options?" he asked. Foster pulled up tactical projections. "We could send a reconnaissance mission first, gather intelligence on these Devourers before committing forces. By then, These Kytherians will be dead, Hayes replied bluntly. They're asking for help right now, not next week. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. This would be humanity's first contact with alien life, and it was happening under the worst possible circumstances. They had no idea what they were walking into, what kind of enemy they'd be facing, or whether their weapons and tactics would even work against something like the Devourer Horde. But as Hayes looked around the room at his officers, he saw something in their eyes that made him smile grimly. These were humans, the same species that had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and countless other disasters. They didn't run from monsters. They hunted them. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Kytheria, like ghosts materializing from a void. Admiral Robert Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship Valiant, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. What he saw would have terrified most species in the galaxy. The Kytherian world was a nightmare of destruction. Massive organic structures that looked like twisted cathedrals grew from the planet's surface where cities used to stand. Rivers of acidic biomatter flowed between these alien growths, and the atmosphere itself glowed with a sickly green radiation that would kill most galactic species in minutes. "Jesus," whispered Lieutenant Tommy Brooks, the ship's communications officer. "Look at the radiation readings. The entire planet is basically a toxic waste dump now." Hayes nodded calmly. "Standard Tuesday for us, then. Open a channel to any surviving Kytherian forces." Down on the planet's surface, Elder Vextera huddled with the last few thousand survivors in an underground bunker. Their air recyclers were failing, and the toxic atmosphere was slowly seeping in through damaged seals. When the human transmission came through, he could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Kytherian survivors, this is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress call, and we're here to help. Please respond with your location coordinates." Vextera stared at the communication device. "They're actually here," he whispered to his aide. Someone came. But when he tried to respond, his voice cracked with despair. "Human fleet, this is Elder Vextera. We appreciate your arrival, but I must warn you, the atmosphere is lethal. The Devourers have poisoned our entire world with bioweapons. Your ships cannot safely approach the surface." There was a pause, then something that sounded almost like laughter from the human commander. "Elder, we appreciate the warning, but we've got this covered. Stand by for immediate evacuation." Vextera watched his monitoring equipment in disbelief as the human shuttles descended directly through the radiation fields that had been killing his people for days. The small craft moved with purpose, completely ignoring atmospheric conditions that should have fried their electronics and killed their crews. The first shuttle landed with a heavy thud outside the bunker's emergency exit. When the airlock cycled open, Vextera expected to see humans in massive environmental suits with full radiation shielding. Instead, a woman in simple military fatigue stepped out, breathing the poisoned air like it was nothing. "Colonel Lisa Turner, Terra Marines," she said with a smile, extending her hand in what Vextera would later learn was a human greeting. "Sorry we're late to the party. Traffic was murder getting here." The Kytherian elder stared in shock. The human woman was breathing their contaminated atmosphere without any protection. Her exposed skin showed no signs of the radiation burns that would have started affecting his people within seconds. "You're not wearing environmental protection," he stammered. "The toxins in the air will kill you." Turner looked around casually, then pulled out a small device and checked its readings. "Yeah, the air quality is pretty rough. Reminds me of downtown Los Angeles on a smoggy day, but with more sulfur compounds." She shrugged. "We'll manage." Behind her, more humans emerged from the shuttle. None wore protective gear. They moved with easy confidence through an environment that was literally poisonous to most galactic life forms. One of them, a young man with sergeant stripes, actually took a deep breath and grinned. "Not bad, Colonel," Sergeant Danny Rodriguez called out. "Better than that swamp planet we trained on last month. At least this stuff doesn't smell like rotting fish." Vextera felt his 4 legs wobble beneath him. "How is this possible? Our scientists calculated that this atmospheric composition will be fatal to any known life form within minutes." Turner's smile widened. "Elder, let me ask you something. What kind of world do you come from? What's your natural environment like?" Kytheria has always been a paradise, Vexthera replied. Gentle rains, perfect temperature, clean air, abundant food. We never had to struggle against our environment. The human colonel nodded thoughtfully. That explains a lot. See, Earth isn't like that. Where we come from, the air in some places will burn your lungs. The water can dissolve metal, and half the plant are trying to poison you. We've got deserts that'll cook you alive during the day and freeze you solid at night. Our oceans are full of creatures that can swallow ships whole, and even our weather tries to kill us with lightning, tornadoes, and hurricanes. She gestured toward her Marines, who were efficiently setting up evacuation equipment despite the toxic environment. We didn't just survive on Earth, we conquered it. Every human you see here is a descendant of millions of years of evolution that turned us into the ultimate survivors. Captain Jake Morrison approached, carrying scanning equipment that should have been fried by the ambient radiation. Colonel, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is we can extract all the survivors within 6 hours. The bad news is we got company incoming. On the horizon, massive shapes were moving toward them. The Devourers had detected the human presence and were responding with typical aggression. Creatures the size of office buildings scuttled across the landscape, their multiple legs crushing the twisted biostructures they'd built from Kytherian cities. Turner watched them approach with the calm interest of a professional predator studying potential prey. Well, would you look at that? They're even uglier than the intelligence report suggested. Vexthera grabbed her arm in panic. You must retreat immediately. Those are Devourer warriors. They've destroyed every military force they've encountered. They're unstoppable. The human colonel looked down at the alien's grip on her arm, then back at the approaching monsters. When she smiled this time, Vexthera felt a chill that had nothing to do with the toxic atmosphere. Elder, she said quietly, you called for help because you needed someone to deal with monsters. What you didn't know is that you called the biggest monsters in the galaxy. And we've been looking for a good fight. The first wave of Devourers crested the ridge like a nightmare tsunami of teeth and claws. Major Daniel Carter crouched behind the twisted remains of what used to be a Kytherian art gallery, watching the monsters approach through his tactical scope. Each creature stood 3 stories tall, with armor-plated skin that had deflected every weapon the galaxy had thrown at it. Contact. 2 clicks and closing. He spoke into his radio with the calm tone of someone ordering coffee. Behind him, his Marines took positions among the ruins with the casual efficiency of people who did this sort of thing for a living. Elder Vexthera huddled in the evacuation zone, watching human soldiers prepare for battle against creatures that had wiped out entire star systems. They don't understand, he whispered to Colonel Turner. These aren't ordinary predators. The Devourers have consumed 14 worlds. They adapt to every weapon, learn from every attack. Turner checked her rifle with practiced ease, the kind of motion that came from years of turning violence into an art form. Elder, respectfully, those 14 worlds didn't have humans on them. We've been fighting things that want to kill us since we figured out how to throw rocks. The ground began to shake as the Devourer pack broke into a full charge. Their multiple legs hammered the earth like drum beats, and their synchronized shrieking filled the air with a sound designed to paralyze prey with terror. Most species would have fled or frozen at that noise. The humans opened fire. What happened next defied everything the Kytherians thought they knew about warfare. The human weapons didn't just shoot. They unleashed hell with precision that bordered on artistic. Sergeant Rachel Adams, positioned on a collapsed building, picked off approaching Devourers with shots that found weak spots in their armor the creatures didn't even know existed. Tango down, 2 o'clock, she called out casually, as if she hadn't just killed something the size of a small building. These things have softer armor joints than the training simulation suggested. Captain Mark Thompson coordinated the ground assault with the relaxed efficiency of someone organizing a barbecue. Johnson, flank left and hit them with the heavy stuff. Peters, I need suppressing fire on that big, ugly one with the extra legs. Williams, you're with me. We're going up the middle. The Devourers, used to crushing terrified enemies who ran or died quickly, found themselves facing something completely new. These humans didn't just fight back. They hunted with the cold intelligence of apex predators. Private Kevin Sullivan, barely 22 years old, found himself face to face with a devourer warrior that had killed thousands of beings. The creature reared up, expecting its prey to cower in terror. Instead, Sullivan calmly pulled the pin from a grenade and shoved it down the monster's throat. "Eat this, you ugly bastard," he said cheerfully, rolling away as the explosion tore the creature apart from the inside. Vextera watched in stunned silence as humans moved through the battlefield like they owned it. They didn't just react to the devourers. They anticipated them, flanked them, trapped them. When one creature tried to burrow underground to escape, Corporal Amy Foster was already waiting with a flamethrower. "Sir," she called to Captain Thompson. This one thought it was clever. Turns out, not so much. The human tactics were brutally simple and terrifyingly effective. They used the devourer's size against them, turned their aggression into vulnerability, and exploited weaknesses that no other species had even recognized. Lieutenant Commander Steve Clark led a squad directly into a nest of smaller devourers, an act that should have been suicide. The creatures swarmed toward easy prey, only to discover that humans had invented something called explosive charges and weren't afraid to use them in close quarters. The nest disappeared in a controlled detonation that left Clark and his team standing in the smoke, checking their equipment with the bored professionalism of exterminators finishing a job. "Nest cleared," Clark reported, moving to secondary objectives. What terrified Vextera more than the human combat effectiveness was how much they seemed to enjoy it. These weren't reluctant warriors forced into battle. They were predators finally finding prey worthy of their attention. Major Carter spotted a massive devourer queen emerging from underground, a creature that had personally consumed 3 Kytherian cities. She was the size of a sports stadium, covered in armor that had shrugged off orbital bombardments, with acid that could melt through starship hulls. Well, Carter said into his radio, "Looks like Mama wants to play. All units. Priority target on the Queen. Let's show her what Earth hospitality looks like." The coordinated assault that followed was a masterpiece of human warfare. They didn't try to fight the Queen head-on. That would have been stupid. Instead, they used artillery to herd her into a kill zone, used aircraft to blind and disorient her, and then sent infantry teams to plant charges in locations that would cause maximum damage. Sergeant Billy Watson, carrying enough explosives to level a city block, actually climbed onto the Queen's back while she was distracted by aerial attacks. "This is either the bravest thing I've ever done," he muttered to himself, "or the stupidest. Probably both." The Queen's death throes shattered windows in the evacuation zone. When the dust settled, human soldiers were already moving to secure the area and check for survivors. Elder Vextera approached Colonel Turner, his voice shaking with something between awe and terror. "Your people, they fight like they were born for war." Turner looked out at her soldiers, who were efficiently cataloging enemy casualties and preparing for the next engagement. "Elder, we weren't born for war. We were born on a world where everything bigger, stronger, and meaner than us wanted to kill us. So we learned to kill first, kill better, and kill everything that threatened the people we care about." She turned to face him, and her smile held no warmth. The Devourers made one critical mistake. They threatened innocents and expected no one to fight back. They didn't count on humans. The massive Devourer Queen erupted from the planet's core like a living earthquake, her emergence sending shockwaves across 3 continents. Elder Vextera watched the monitoring screens in horror as the creature revealed her true size. She wasn't just the size of a city. She was bigger than their largest metropolitan area, with thousands of smaller devourers swarming around her like angry wasps. "She's been feeding on our planet's core," he whispered to Colonel Turner. "For 3 days, she's been consuming the very heart of our world. Nothing can stop something that massive." Turner studied the tactical readouts with the same calm focus she'd shown throughout the battle. "Elder, you keep saying things are impossible, and we keep proving you wrong. This is just another day at the office for us." Admiral Hayes coordinated the orbital assault from the flagship bridge, watching his tactical officers work with practiced precision. The Queen was unlike anything in their databases. Part biological organism, part living fortress, with defensive capabilities that had evolved over millions of years of consuming civilizations. "All ships, this is Admiral Hayes," he announced across the fleet communications. "We've got a big ugly target that needs killing. Time to show this thing what humans do to bullies. Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Martin commanded the orbital bombardment from the heavy cruiser Thunderbolt. Her weapon systems were designed based on human military philosophy. If something was threatening people you cared about, you used whatever it took to stop it. The energy cannons that opened fire weren't just powerful, they were vicious, designed by minds that understood sometimes you had to fight monsters with monster tactics. Target acquired, all weapons hot, she reported, firing for effect. The orbital bombardment lit up the planet's surface like a second sun. Energy beams that could crack continents hammered into the Queen's armored hide, while kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed struck with the force of nuclear weapons. Any normal creature would have been vaporized instantly. The Queen barely flinched. Minimal damage to target, reported the weapons officer. Her armor is adapting to our energy frequencies. Martin smiled grimly. Then we'll try something she hasn't seen before. Switch to kinetic penetrators, Earth origin tungsten cores. Sometimes the old ways work best. Down on the surface, Commander Stephen Clark led his special operations team toward the Queen's massive form. The plan was insane by any rational military standard. They were going to enter the creature voluntarily, find her central nervous system, and destroy from the inside. Remember, people, Clark told his team as they approached the Queen's massive maw, we're not the first humans to walk into the belly of the beast. We're just the first to do it with high explosives and bad attitudes. Sergeant Bobby Harrison checked his gear one more time. The explosives he carried were specifically designed for this mission, not just destructive, but cruel in a way that only human engineering could achieve. They would cause maximum damage to biological systems, while being completely harmless to the team carrying them. Sir, Harrison said with a grin, this is either the most brilliant plan in military history or the stupidest. I'm honestly not sure which. Clark led his team directly into the Queen's mouth, past rows of teeth the size of trees, through corridors of living tissue that pulsed with alien life. The environment inside the creature was beyond toxic. Acidic vapors that would dissolve most materials, pressure that would crush normal beings, and temperature fluctuations that ranged from freezing to boiling. The humans moved through it like they were taking a casual stroll. Atmosphere is pretty rough in here, reported Private Julie Adams, checking her readings. Reminds me of that chemical plant job we did in Detroit, but with more tentacles. They navigated through the Queen's living interior using maps created by their scientists, who had studied devourer biology with the same intensity that human researchers brought to everything they wanted to kill. The team moved past offensive organisms, through immune system responses, and around biological traps that had evolved to stop internal threats. Captain Andy Foster coordinated the external assault while Clark's team worked inside. His job was to keep the Queen distracted and prevent her from focusing her defenses inward. He did this by having his artillery units target her sensory organs with weapons designed to cause maximum pain and confusion. All batteries, concentrate fire on the neural clusters behind the primary eyes, he ordered. Let's give this thing the worst headache in galactic history. The Queen's response was immediate and violent. She lashed out at the human forces with appendages that could level mountains, sprayed acid that ate through solid rock, and released swarms of smaller devourers from internal breeding chambers. But every attack she made revealed more weaknesses for the humans to exploit. Inside the creature, Clark's team reached their objective, a chamber the size of an aircraft hangar that housed the Queen's primary brain cluster. The organ pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, processing information from across her vast body and coordinating the actions of millions of smaller devourers. There she is, Clark said quietly. The thing that's been eating planets for breakfast. The explosives they planted weren't just designed to destroy. They were engineered to cause a cascade failure that would shut down the Queen's entire nervous system. Human scientists had studied pain as a weapon, understanding that sometimes stopping a threat required more than just killing it. Charges set, Harrison reported. We got 2 minutes to get clear. The team fought their way back through the Queen's body as her immune system finally realized the threat. Biological defenses that had evolved over eons tried desperately to stop the humans, but Clark's people moved with the focused violence of apex predators protecting their territory. They emerged from the Queen's mouth just as the charges detonated. The Queen's death scream shattered windows across the remaining Kytherian cities. Her massive form convulsed once, twice, then collapsed with an impact that registered on seismic equipment 3 systems away. As she died, the millions of smaller devourers connected to her hive mind simply stopped functioning, their shared consciousness severed. Admiral Hayes watched the tactical display as devourer forces across the entire sector went dark. All units, this is Admiral Hayes. Target neutralized. Kytherian space is secure. Elder Vexteros stared at the human fleet in complete silence. In less than 18 hours, these strange beings had accomplished what the combined forces of 14 civilizations had failed to do in 6 months. They had killed the unkillable, stopped the unstoppable, and they had done it with the casual efficiency of professionals handling a routine job. Colonel Turner found him in the evacuation zone, standing amid the rescued survivors of his people. Elder, we'll have transport ships here within the hour to relocate your people to safe worlds. The threat is over. Vextera looked up at her with something approaching religious awe. How? How is this possible? Turner looked out at the smoking remains of Queen, then back at the alien Elder. Because, Elder, when someone calls for help, humans answer. And when something threatens innocent people, we don't stop until it's dead. 3 months after the Devourer Queen's death, representatives from 17 different alien species gathered in what remained of the Kytherian capital for an unprecedented meeting. The Galactic Council had been scattered and broken when the Devourers first appeared, with most civilizations fleeing to the Outer Rim rather than face extinction. Now, for the first time in over a year, they were meeting again. Elder Vexteros stood at the podium, his voice carrying across the assembled delegates through universal translators. We are here today because of a species we had never encountered before, from a world we didn't know existed. When we sent our desperate call for help into the void, only one civilization answered. In the back of the chamber, Admiral Robert Hayes sat with his senior staff, still wearing the simple military uniforms that had somehow become the most respected sight in the galaxy. They looked completely ordinary. No exotic technology, no superhuman features, nothing that would suggest they were the deadliest species the universe had ever produced. Ambassador Keltera of the Vishan Trade Federation rose from her seat, her translator rendering her clicking speech into Standard Galactic. Admiral Hayes, before we discuss your proposal, we must understand something. Our intelligence services have been studying your species since the Kytherian incident, your home world, this Earth. Our computers classify it as uninhabitable. Hayes smiled politely. In what way, Ambassador? In every way, she replied, consulting her data pad. Extreme weather patterns, toxic atmospheric conditions in many regions, predatory life forms, geological instability, radiation exposure, and gravity levels that would crush most civilized beings. According to our environmental databases, Earth qualifies as a Class 12 death world, the highest danger rating in our system. General Michael Foster, who had been quietly reviewing tactical reports, looked up with mild interest. And that seems unusual to you? The Vishan ambassador stared at him. General, Class 12 worlds are considered uninhabitable by definition. Most species use them for weapons testing or waste disposal. The fact that you not only survive there, but thrive suggests... Suggests what? Admiral Hayes asked, though his tone remained friendly. Representative Mordak of the Centauran Republic leaned forward, his scale features showing obvious discomfort. Admiral, it suggests that your species evolved under conditions that would be considered torture by the rest of the galaxy. It explains why you fight the way you do. Colonel Lisa Turner, who had led the first evacuation missions on Kytheria, shifted in her seat. Representative Mordak, how exactly do we fight? The Centauran's translator struggled with his response. You fight like predators who have never known fear. During the Kytherian battle, our observers recorded human soldiers advancing into toxic atmospheres, radiation fields, and direct combat with creatures that outmassed them by factors of hundreds. You didn't retreat, you didn't hesitate, you didn't show any normal survival instincts. Captain Mark Thompson, who had earned a reputation as one of the deadliest ground commanders in human history, actually chuckled. Representative, those weren't extreme conditions. That was just Tuesday for us. Elder Vextera gestured toward the humans with something approaching reverence. Honored delegates, I have spent months studying these humans and their homeworld. Do you know what they consider recreational activities? The chamber fell silent. They voluntarily jump from aircraft at extreme altitudes for entertainment. They climb mountains in conditions that would kill most of us, calling it sport. They race vehicles at speeds that turn crashes into certain death, and they do it for fun. They have competitions to see who can survive in their world's most dangerous environments. He paused, letting that information sink in. But more importantly, when they heard our call for help, they didn't hesitate. They didn't calculate odds or consider costs. They came because someone needed help, and helping people in trouble is what they do. Admiral Hayes stood up, addressing the assembled delegates directly. The Terran Protection Compact is simple. Any peaceful species facing extinction-level threats can request human intervention. We don't ask for tribute. We don't demand territory. We don't want to rule anybody. We just want to make sure that when monsters show up, someone fights back. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Representative Thexera of the Delvani Collective spoke up. And if we refuse his protection? Hayes shrugged. Then you refuse. We're not conquerors, Representative. We're the people who show up when conquerors need to be stopped. Commander Stephen Clark, who had personally killed the Devourer Queen, added quietly. But understand something. If another threat like the Devourers appears, and you haven't signed the compact, we might be busy helping people who did sign it. The vote was unanimous, but not for the reasons the humans expected. After the formal session ended, Ambassador Keltera approached Admiral Hayes privately. Admiral, may I ask you something honestly? What do you humans really want from this arrangement? Hayes looked out through the chamber's transparent walls at the reconstruction efforts underway in the Kytherian city. Human engineering teams worked alongside alien crews, rebuilding what the Devourers had destroyed. Human medical teams treated wounded survivors with the same care they'd show their own people. Ambassador, he said quietly, where I come from, we have a saying, evil triumphs when good people do nothing. We've seen what happens when civilized species run from bullies instead of fighting them. We watched monsters consume entire worlds while everyone else hid in the outer rim. He turned to face her directly. What we want is simple. We want to live in a galaxy where calling for help means someone will answer, where peaceful people can build beautiful things without worrying about predators tearing them down, where children can grow up safe. The ambassador stared at him for a long moment. And you're willing to fight the monsters so the rest of us don't have to? Hayes nodded. Ambassador, we come from a world full of monsters. We learned to fight them so well that we became the thing monsters are afraid of. Now we're offering that protection to anyone who needs it. As the delegates began to leave, Elder Vextera found himself alone with the human leadership. Admiral, there's something I must tell you. Before your people arrived, we had begun to believe that the universe was fundamentally hostile, that peace was impossible, and civilized life was doomed. Admiral Hayes smiled, the expression carrying warmth that hadn't been there during the formal negotiations. Elder, the universe is hostile. It's full of things that want to kill peaceful people and destroy beautiful things. But it's also full of people willing to fight back. He gestured toward his officers, men and women who had volunteered to face the galaxy's worst nightmares so others didn't have to. The difference is, now the galaxy has humans, and we specialize in making monsters extinct. 3 months later, when the first distress call came in under the new compact, a species called a Melody facing invasion by cybernetic raiders, the human response was immediate and overwhelming. The raiders lasted 6 hours. Word spread quickly through the galaxy. The sheep had found their sheepdog, and the wolves were learning to fear the dark.